Hello, and welcome to Seeing Jesus with Paul Miller. I'm Liz Voboril, and I'm here with Paul and our colleague Robert Rowe, who works as our student ministry coordinator, helping the next generation see Jesus. The ministry behind this podcast, See Jesus, creates discipleship tools and trains people in how to use them. Our desire is to rekindle within the church the central passions of Christianity, a love for Jesus, a desire to imitate him, and real working communion with the Father. Today, we're continuing our series of podcasts on J-Curve community by looking at a story that pulls together all the themes we've been talking about so far: wisdom, the Holy Spirit, going lower, and weakness. The title of this episode is The Fog of Love. Guys, do you want to give people a little bit of a preview about what we mean by this fog?
Well, I think it's something that a lot of us experience, and that is you've got this huge bucket of principles or of biblical principles, and you have the bucket of love, different ways of loving. You have a bucket of faith of how you need to believe, and you've got advice from people. But it's just like the problem is so overwhelming, so persistent, so it just it bedevils you that you're in a fog. And of what a fog does, and I got this from I think his name is Juan de Benito, and a Spanish reformer from the Reformation that was in the in France. That when you're in a fog, it just distorts reality, and you could be right near a cliff 2 feet away, and you don't know it, or you fear the wrong thing, and you're not afraid of where you should be. And a lot of times the intentions are good, everything's in place, but you have no idea what to do. So that's what this story is about.
Yeah, I also like it because it feels like love is often, like, I think the Hallmark card version of love is usually clear, always feels good and nice and happy. And the fog of love kind of points out, just because it doesn't feel like that Hallmark card doesn't mean there's not love in that moment.
Right.
So, Robert.
Yeah, I'll read Paul's story. It was similar to, I was filling this story this morning with my 13-year-old daughter as we were in the fog of love riding to school.
So, Robert, you could write your own story, but it's probably a little too close. This story was 28 years ago that Robert's going to tell, and then we'll talk about it together. So, Robert, go ahead. Tell my story.
Great. Here we go. One of the first times I saw clearly what it was to be in step with the Spirit was when my daughter, Courtney, a high school senior, came home late from youth group. We had a job list on our refrigerator with 15-minute jobs, 5 minutes of work and 10 minutes of complaining. That night, Courtney had to sweep the kitchen, and I hadn't said anything, but when she came in the door, she was angry. I was making her do her job, even though she was tired. I volunteered to help her, but that only made it worse. She was just mad. I was about to say, I'm not sure why you're mad at me. We agreed on these jobs. We talked about it as a family, but I didn't trust myself, so I hesitated. I recall fighting to be weak and not talk. I said again, Courtney, what's wrong? When she snapped back, nothing. I don't want to talk about it. I got a clue. Something else was going on. Finally, I said, sit down. To my surprise, she did. I sat next to her and asked again, Courtney, what's wrong? What's upsetting you? She said that her youth group leader had ridiculed her in front of her friends, and she felt shamed. As I listened, I realized I'd been struggling with similar problems. We shared our problems with one another for about 10 minutes. Then we did her job together. I remember consciously waiting for the Spirit to help me love. During Courtney's ranting, I prayed because I was confused, uncertain. I lacked wisdom. I knew our rules were important, but I also knew the tendency of my flesh to correct and lecture. The Spirit helped me to shut my mouth. Plus, I'd recently noticed in the Gospels how much Jesus looked at people. The Spirit didn't operate in a vacuum. The body of Christ and the Word were his language, helping me to listen.
So you get a sense of the fog that I was in that evening, because I had good principles there. You could think of 2 or 3 commandments that would fit that situation, and we had a good process. We talked about this as a family. I was gentle, and the problem was clear. I had a rebellious child, but I just didn't know what to do. So I was in a fog.
And Paul, I love the simplicity of the illustration, because it's just day to day life. Like, this is not a monumental decision that's going on here. This is just like me riding in the truck this morning. It's just this simple taking my daughter to school. Like, there's just this simple ways in which fog comes in, and we just feel paralyzed sometimes.
I'm struck by that. The presence of the fog is actually part of the love, right? Because if you were just being all about the clarity and the principles, you'd be like, there's no fog here. You just need to do your job. Come on, stop. In a certain way, that fog is the space for love and waiting and listening. We typically feel like fog is bad and clarity is good, but the sitting with that is part of where the love shows up in the story.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples of that, when my dad was teaching preaching at Westminster Seminary here in Philadelphia many years ago, that he had a student just not do well on a sermon, and he came down from the podium or the little platform just really discouraged. And he just really blew it. And Dad suggested to him that he should have gone up the way he came down, which is just a simple way to describe just how the gospel works. Is God begins with our weakness, and our instincts are to run from weakness to clarity. Now, I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself here, because there's a lot of things that we want to reflect on. There is a danger I've seen where people kind of remain in fog, where that fog becomes where they live. And it's almost like they create fog machines, that if they're not like they've taken this aspect of how the gospel works in our life, and they say that that it somehow makes fog sacred. But the point is, we're going somewhere. It's where you begin. Because it leads you the Spirit leads you into clarity. Because what we're talking about here is the path of dying, moving into rising. So you eventually get to clarity. Sometimes it might be, actually, if you pay attention to the stories you're in, sometimes it could be 20, 30 years. I mean, I keep seeing new things about things that happened 30 years ago. But anyway.
Yeah, and we want a logical, quick fix when we're in the fog. And often when it's not logical and we don't understand it, a lot of times we resort to other means, and we don't just let the Spirit work in the fog and wait on wisdom and be patient and listening.
Right.
Yeah. Our culture just so wants to fix the problem so quick.
Right.
We're uncomfortable in the fog.
Yeah.
In other words, here's another way of saying it, is all of God's principles aren't enough. God needs to be at the center of his principles. What does that look like? That's the Spirit.
Yeah. And that does make me think even just of that, a visceral response to fog, right, is to slow down, to be watching and listening, right?
Yeah.
And Paul, I think we see you in the story, talks about fighting to be weak and not talk, like that, not trusting yourself and your sort of gut instinct in the moment, and then kind of praying for wisdom. You say, I remember consciously waiting for the Spirit to help me love, right? So that's that I'm in the fog. I got to take a dependent posture here.
Right. Yeah. So that deliberate, I was active in trying to be weak. Trying to be weak isn't quite right. because I could feel, most of my sins are on the quick side, not on the slow side.
You were receiving your weakness.
Right. Yeah. So inefficiency, not following the rules, all those things efficiency for me is fog free. It's just do your job. You know what I mean? What's so complicated here? So for me to realize I am in a fog, because I could, just like you were saying earlier, I could run over Courtney, and I could let truth get in the way of her. So it's an acknowledgement that I don't know what to say. And so I'm just quietly praying.
Yeah, it makes me wonder all the times in my own life, my own parenting, how when I didn't know what to say, there were other, like the flesh took over. The emotions became heightened.
Right.
If I didn't yell loud enough the first time for them to hear me, I'll yell louder so they get the point.
Right.
Those, and all the different ways in which people, vast number of ways in our flesh that we react when we don't know what to say.
Right.
And it's really, the flesh has a lot of different facets to it.
The Spirit could easily have led in a different set of circumstances to something. The J curve might have been the death to experience my daughter's wrath by making her do the job. That's why there's a clear range of options in front of me. And that's equally valid. It's a biblical principle that's a very important one, but the ones that are harder for me are the ones of listening and slowing down and praying. And so even when I slow down and pray, that might lead to something that is, let me just, one more thought before we sort of go deeper into this, is that one of the themes in Jesus' descent down to the cross, Paul picks up in Philippians 2, where Jesus begins by not grasping at his divinity. And it's a theme all through Paul that we've referred to several times. But so Paul, in Philippians 1, he doesn't grasp at his desire to go to heaven, but remains behind. And so what I was dying to there, so this was to use our language, this was a repentance J curve. What I was dying to was clarity, justice, respect, and efficiency. I was dying to all those instincts of my heart.
Yeah. And we get to see the whole story, right? Because this isn't one of those 20 or 30 year, it is in one sense, but in another, this is a little mini story, but we get to see the sweetness of you guys connecting deeply on the backside of that. But I appreciate what you're saying about it. That slowing down could have led to a whole range of options, right? Which might not have always had that sweet kind of moment at the end.
Right. And so there was context here. Courtney was a hard worker. She was faithful. She was not generally rebellious, so there was a lot of, she could be very passionate, and I think I brought I was increasingly aware just through my own repentance that I would fix her passion. And so I was aware of that. So this didn't come out of the blue. I was aware that I brought stuff to the table. I was more fearful of myself and how I might react than her. So that's why I was slowing down.
What did it feel like to set aside grasping at clarity, justice, and respect? Like, what did it feel like to navigate the story this way?
I was uncertain, so I was quieter. And I just, in the beginning of that, I can always feel my restless spirit. I can feel the engine churning. And that's why any kind of waiting in my life, I've even sometimes, when I'm really inconvenienced and someone else has been a mistake, someone else, I just say your bank teller and their machine breaks down, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'll often say, my soul needs to wait. It's good for me. I just tell that to people. They have no idea what I'm talking about. But so I feel my restlessness. Mm-hmm. So when I shut down, it's kind of like this engine's been spinning. Like a lot of you will feel that when you go on vacation. It'll take you 2 or 3 days just to kind of relax. And the neat thing about being in step with the Spirit is you can feel that a little earlier, and so I feel restless then. Like I'm not feeling a series of warm, fuzzy feelings. Mm-hmm. It's not a enjoyable experience for me to shut up and listen. I know that. And again, someone's personality could be the exact opposite, Mm-hmm. The key for me, though, if I could go onto this, it's just this awareness that has come that I'm waiting for instructions and leadership from a person. And that person is right in the room with me, and it's the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And Paul's language in 1 Corinthians 2 and 3 is spiritual wisdom. And we talked about that last time, but that's capital S. That's not like Oprah has small s spiritual wisdom. You know what I mean? Like center yourself or something like that, or, get in touch with your inner child, whatever that is. But we're talking about capital S Spirit, that there's the person of the Spirit who comes alive in my weakness. And what he brings, the Spirit brings Jesus. That's why Paul will often call it the Spirit of Jesus, or Jesus who is the Spirit. He does that in 2 Corinthians 3. So you can see this movement now. Oh, and what am I doing? You asked me about my feelings. What am I actually physically doing? I am praying. And so there's this cascade now of my awareness of my weakness leads to prayer. And they're not complicated prayers. They're just, Jesus, help me. I have no idea would just help me listen, and that leads, so prayer, so weakness and awareness of my weakness leads to me these quiet prayers that leads then to the Spirit. Surprise happens. And I got a surprise. Courtney said something that made me realize there was more going on.
Yeah.
And you can't package the Spirit. It's not like he is the person. He's like, it's kind of like I've got this map and I've got my goal on my journey, but I need a guide. Mm-hmm. And now I have the guide. And so, cause I don't know I'm a fork in a road and I don't know which fork to take. And he shows me a new path. So so that leads to wisdom, which then leads to love. So it's like a cascade of 5 steps of weakness, prayer, Spirit, wisdom, love.
Yeah, Paul, I was just thinking as you were talking about it, how comfortable Jesus was in the fog.
Yes.
And how so very, like what you're describing is what it really means to be human. Yes. So when you see Jesus as the fullness of humanity, like every time fog would enter, what did he do? He went and talked to his Father. Like, give me clarity, give me wisdom, give me understanding.
Yes.
And then he comes out with this beautiful display of love, direction, a clear pathway. But his dependence was ever so clear in the midst of the fog.
Yeah.
Really beautiful.
It also makes me think the first step in that 5-step process was weakness, and how I know in an earlier episode in the same series, we were talking about how weakness can be like that thing. I was confessing that my internal GPS likes to reroute me when weakness seems around the corner, like, oh, you can avoid it if you take a right here and a left here.
Right.
Right? So but what all you would have missed, right? If you had said, oh, I'm feeling weak. Courtney, you just got to do your jobs. 5 minutes. I'll be back to check on you later. Whatever. Like if you had avoided the pause and the pain of sitting with that engine revving and not knowing quite what to do, you'd have missed out on such a neat gift.
Right. That's right.
Okay, so we're going to look next. This is something we're going to send out in the podcast notes. If you don't receive those, you can sign up at any point at cjesus.net/podcast. We send out an email where we have some quotes from the episode and any tools or resources that are connected to it. So this is a chart where we're contrasting the wisdom of the world versus the wisdom of the cross. Really the wisdom of the world being the flesh and the wisdom of the cross coming from the spirit. So we're going to talk this through a little bit for our listeners. We've got data coming in and then a different way to read it in both places, but the data is the same. The data is Courtney is mad about doing her jobs. Paul, the wisdom of the cross, what do you see?
I'm not sure what I see. And that's strange for me, because I move to clarity, I fix problems, but just that takes so much faith for me to say, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's not very neat, Paul.
It's not or efficient.
Yeah.
Robert, who is at the center from the flesh, the wisdom of the world side? Who's at the center in the story?
Yeah, Paul is. He doesn't need the Spirit. He's got all the wisdom that Paul Miller would have.
That's right. Because everything is clear,
Everything is clear. He's got the authority. He's the parent. She's the child.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
It's the 1950s. I mean, what?
All right. Paul, who is at the center in the wisdom of the cross side?
As we've said, it's the Spirit. So I'm at the edge of the story. I love to think of it that way. So I'm self-consciously realizing that I'm not in charge of the story. It might look like it on paper, but I know in fact that I'm at the edge and I'm, or maybe it's like I'm body surfing. I love to body surf on the Jersey Shore. We go there for vacation where I'm waiting for a wave to catch. I clearly know I'm not creating the wave and I need for the wave to come. So, and I don't know what it's going to look like or when it's going to come.
Yep. That's awesome.
So Paul, could you speak just for a second on, because I know that Jesus oftentimes in the Gospels, as we're reading these stories, he's kind of on the edge of the story in a lot of ways. And sometimes it feels like for us in the middle of the fog, we're either asking God, where are you? And it seems God's kind of waiting in the peripheral on the edge. Can you speak kind of like, it's part of one of our questions, but what does that feel like to just sit at the edge?
Well, it's a little nervous. I mean, basically, my instincts are to use prayer as a way to put me back in control of the story. Okay. Does that, and it just doesn't work that way. I mean, we're not made. I mean, and the beautiful, let me go back to Jesus for a second, Robert, that when he goes into the desert, he's led by the Spirit in the desert. I think we've said that before. He leaves in the power of the Spirit. And because Jesus himself is led by the Spirit, then that's our model. So one of the unifying features of Jesus' stories is the word awkward. It just because I don't like awkwardness in these stories I'm in. And it's just, Jesus, not only his silence is awkward, they bring the woman, John 8, in front of him caught in adultery. He just goes down and starts writing in the sand with his finger. I mean, just what the heck are you doing, Jesus? Or the woman, it's just, and then he's quiet, doesn't say anything. I mean, it's just awkward. I mean, like the disciples with the feeding of the 5,000, he creates these awkward situations. like you feed them,
Right.
and or sleeping in a boat when there's a major storm around it. When I read that, I always snore like Jesus to Kim, and she just thinks that's really funny. So it's just awkward, and generally humanity dislikes awkward. That's why I love teenagers, is because I do awkward really well when I'm around teenagers. And so I get new life. Anyway, that's a little of an aside, but I feel that way. And so there's a spiritual kind of awkward that God meets us in there. And the awkwardness is we're waiting for God to move, So that's a little different take than lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. All right. So back to this wisdom of the world versus wisdom of the cross. Robert, what do you do in the wisdom of the world? What should Paul do?
Yeah, he should correct Courtney.
Right.
Just tell her what's right. Do it.
What's the question?
Right. Yes. Wisdom of the cross, Paul. What's the wisdom of the cross?
Is wait, pray, ask questions. It's that weakness of Paul. I was with you in weakness and fear and much trembling.
All right. What do you say, Robert, in all your clear wisdom from the world? What do you say to Courtney?
Yeah, we say the list is on the refrigerator. We've agreed to this. You know what to do.
Yep.
Right. Hey, for the 50s.
And Paul, what's the wisdom of the cross? What do you say in that world?
Initially, I don't say anything because I'm not sure what to say. So I'm kind of half wondering, half praying. What's wrong? What should I say? And then I venture a question. Courtney, is anything wrong? So there's this delicate, unsure of myself.
Yep. All right. And Robert, your attitude in flesh and wisdom of the world?
Nice, maybe, but also demanding her to obey the rules.
Yeah.
We've made an agreement.
Yep.
So Courtney should follow through.
Yep. And Paul, your attitude according to the wisdom of the cross?
I'm wondering. I'm watching. I'm waiting.
And the feel of the activity for you, Robert?
Clear and confident and quick.
And Paul?
It's initially slow, like a J curve, but in time it's quick. And the flesh, as I had lots of experience in, starts out quick and ends up molasses. It ends up slow. It just because I'm not. What is the Spirit enables me to be attentive to both the person and the principles that I have from God. So, and I could easily go in either direction. If I was just attentive purely to the person and neglect the principles, that's really kind of a drift into liberalism and almost kind of a family idolatry of worshiping my child. And if I put the principles ahead, then I end up crushing the person. So that's why I need the Spirit of Jesus to show me how this all works.
Yeah. The feeling of safety, Robert, in the flesh.
Good. It's good.
Paul.
And for the Spirit, it felt risky.
Yeah. The effect on the community, Robert?
I could divide by gossiping. Courtney's go tell Jill, Courtney's driving me crazy.
And Paul?
And then the beautiful thing is that I unite with Courtney by moving towards her.
And your heart cry, Robert?
Do your job. Do this and live.
Right.
And Paul?
Is Abba Father, which is Jesus' cry. It's the cry of the confused and the vulnerable.
And the final result?
Yeah, my reaction, it would have been separation.
Yeah. And then for Jesus, it was reconciliation.
Just backing up and looking at those two paths, I am struck by just how the one feels so clear and tight and like an algorithm, right? A computer could execute. It's really
Right.
like if A, then B, then C, it like kind of bang, bang, bang. And the other one is like the spinning wheel on the computer for a while, like that, like, processing kind of feel. So if I was going to market one or the other of those paths, the one that's really clear and specific feels much more like, yeah, let's do that. Like it feels like a solid, but obviously where they land makes you say, oh, it's worth the work of the other, but it's work for us, right?
Yeah, which is why I love Paul's constant, steady metaphor for our life with the Spirit is walk by the Spirit, live by the Spirit. I think sometimes the walk by the Spirit is translated as keep in step with the Spirit. But think of the tour guide. Okay, where are we going to go next? What's going to happen? You can ask the tour guide those questions, but ultimately you trust the tour guide. When you're on the bus or whatever, he might have told you in general where you're going, but he can't tell you in detail until you've been there. So there's this sense that the Spirit makes, Jesus present at every point. And so, and we want a map. And if we had the map, then we wouldn't need Jesus, is another way of saying it. And the map is his dying and rising. He gives us the map, but he doesn't tell us when the rising will occur.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Just to summarize what we've been talking about, the Corinthian wisdom is not the wisdom of the J curve, which is weakness, but it's the wisdom of I can do it. You've got it within yourself to do it, which is just a modern mantra. And if you were to think of the letter J, the J curve, theirs would be a dotted line from the top of the J, from one peak of the J to the other. So it's, you're moving on up. And Corinthian wisdom is get the right principles and hard work, and you can do it. And the wisdom of the cross is that I can only do the path of Jesus unless I have the Spirit of Jesus. And when I have the Spirit of Jesus with me on the path of Jesus, that's when I create a Jesus community. This is a little corny to say it this way, is instead of tribalism, which that would have created tribalism. I would have been divided from Courtney, and I'd have been me and Jill against Courtney. That creates the unity that only the Spirit of Jesus can create. So my little mini death created a mini Jesus community. And you do enough of that, and it really gets attractive and exciting.
That's great.
Yeah, how encouraging that is for parents, for people that work with students, just to think the patience of that, right? Because I want wisdom. I want more classes on parenting. I want to read more books on parenting because I got to have wisdom on this. But very seldom do I go to the realities of, man, maybe I'm entering into a time where I slow down, I'm prayerful, and I'm listening to the guidance of the Spirit in this. Not that those other things aren't good. They're helpful, but there is a reality to that.
All right. Well, thank you all for being with us today. As always, you can sign up to receive show notes at cjesus.net/podcast. And thanks again for joining us.